Hello, everyone. I would like to welcome you today and thank you for joining us for our Thursday talk with CMHA and SBA. Today's topic is coping skills for businesses during the pandemic. We have a guest speaker, Dr. Dwonna Thompson. And today, if you have any questions, we're going to do Q&A at the end of her presentation. And let me give you a little bio on Miss Thompson. Dr. Dwonna Lenoir has worked in the field of psychology since 1998 and comes with over 21 years of experience in providing services to children, adults, and families. Dr. Dwonna earned her Bachelor of Arts degree in psychology from Hampton University in 1998 and her Master's of Arts degree in counseling psychology from St. Xavier University in Chicago, Illinois in 2000. Dr. Dwonna is a licensed professional clinical counselor in the state of Ohio. She is a doctor of psychology, having obtained her degree from Adler University in Chicago, Illinois in 2011. Dr. Dwonna enjoys the work she does and has held various positions while in this field. Dr. Dwonna is currently the director of the Young Child Institute with Central Clinic Behavioral Health Services and teaches psychology courses at Wright State University as an adjunct professor. In addition, Dr. Dwonna is owner of Live Well Group, LLC, a private psychological service practice in Blue Ash, Ohio. In her practice, Dr. Dwonna works to help individuals and families live their best lives. Dr. Dwonna believes in the power of the human spirit and enjoys helping others reach their full potential. Dr. Dwonna is a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority, Incorporated, currently serving in the Phi Psi Omega chapter, Forest Park, Ohio. She is also a member of Jack and Jill of America, Inc., Cincinnati chapter. Dr. Dwonna married best friend and high school sweetheart, Nedron Ned, and together they are raising three beautiful children, Dante, Denver, and Destiny. I would like to present to you all Dr. Dwonna Thompson.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, Jaquetta, for that nice introduction. It's always interesting to hear people read your bio. It's like, that's me. Yeah, that's me. All right, so I would like to thank you all for tuning in. It looks like we're picking up some momentum and people are joining us. I would like to personally thank my parents for being online. My father is here, and it looks like my mother is trying to get connected. So I appreciate that support as well. Um, so I am going to start sharing my screen. Is that okay, Jaquetta? Okay. I'm going to start sharing my screen. Jaquetta, give me a thumbs up if you can see that. All right, so today what we're going to talk about is coping and self-care in business during a pandemic. As Jaquetta told you, I am the owner of Live Well Group, which is a private practice offering psychological services to the Cincinnati area and other areas in the Northern Kentucky, Cincinnati area. And so we offer individual family therapy, just about any type of consultation you would need as it relates to life and life issues. And right now, you know that we've been in a pandemic almost coming up on a year. In about 2 weeks, we will have been in this position for about a year. And so with that comes a lot of stress and difficulties with running businesses and maintaining our businesses. And so I understand that things have changed for us greatly, but there are things that we can do to manage that. You may be asking yourself, what is stress? One thing I want you to know is that stress is very normal. It's a normal response to various situations. Now, you have eustress and de-stress. Eustress is the good stress. That's, I got a new job, but it's stressful going into the new job. I got a new contract, but it's stressful managing new contracts. I'm getting married. I am happy about that, but it is stressful getting married. I'm having a baby. All of that is very, very good happenings, but it is also very difficult to manage sometimes. But that's the good stress. That's the stress that we welcome, the stress that's okay to experience because we know that there's a better payoff for that. Then you have de-stress, which we commonly say is distress. I'm in distress. I feel bad. I am having a moment, a difficult time. That's when we enter into a pandemic. Our business is mal affected by the pandemic. We have difficulties financially. We have health issues. We have stress that is causing our body to act different ways. That's distress. And so, what we want to realize is that because stress is a normal occurrence, we can feel either or at any moment in time. Stress responses vary based on who we are. Your reaction to a particular stress may not be my reaction to a particular stress, and my reaction to something even smaller may not be your reaction to that same thing. And so, what we have to understand is that our stress is very much so something that is unique to us and that we have to learn how to deal with on our own. So, what does stress look like during an infectious disease outbreak? One minute we were hearing about coronavirus, COVID 19, and it was impacting things well away from the United States. There was overseas, it was going on. It was things that was so far removed from us that I don't know that we actually thought that it was going to be something that we would have to worry about. Well, soon and very soon, we realized that not only did we have to be concerned about coronavirus, we also found ourselves in the midst of the exact same pandemic that was happening across the nation. And so there became fear and worry about our own health. Now we have to be concerned with who we're coming in contact with, who we are allowing ourselves to be around. So much so that in many states and across the United States, it became an issue of quarantine. Everyone needed to stay home, everyone needed to stay safe in order to keep us all from having various health concerns. We started to worry about the health of our loved ones. We had issues with those of our loved ones who had co occurring issues like diabetes, high blood pressure, any of those respiratory infections or respiratory issues that would lead them to be vulnerable to this virus. And so it became an issue of now I have to not only worry about me and my household, I have to worry about others as well. There was changes in our sleep and our eating patterns, difficulty sleeping and concentrating, worsening of chronic health problems, and an increased use of alcohol, drugs, and tobacco. That is cited by the CDC in 2020. What does stress impact? I am sure as business owners, as persons who are concerned with your own functionality as it relates to business, you noticed almost immediately when the stress started that you felt the stress in various parts of your body, in various aspects of your life. Stress can impact your body, your thoughts, your feelings, and your behavior. It can affect almost everything. With our body, we start to have headaches, muscle tension, chest pain, tiredness, upset stomach, etc. Our mood is infected, which includes our thoughts and our feelings, things such as anxiety, restlessness, lack of motivation, feeling overwhelmed, irritability or anger, sadness, and or depression. Behavior changes in appetites, angry outbursts, misuse of drugs and alcohol, misuse of tobacco, social withdrawal, exercising less often. And so, as this demonstrates, while stress may be this one issue or this small thing, it really can impact us on so many levels. And I use the word small, but I do recognize and want to reiterate that one's response to stress may be very, very different from the next. Some business owners, when we entered into a pandemic, there was not a very big impact to their business. But for others, they weren't even able to run their business anymore because of the pandemic. And then it became difficult to even have a livelihood after that. So, depending on what your impact is from the pandemic, from stress, you'll see different aspects impacted by that stress, body, mood, and behavior. So we know we're stressed. Now what? Being in the middle of an infectious disease pandemic is stressful for many people. The good news is that we can do things to help manage our stress. Each of us can take action to help not only manage the stress that we're experiencing, but also to lessen our overall stress. So, some examples of pandemic stress include increased anxiety and uncertainty. Again, one day everything is normal, and the next day they shut down the world. And so, if they shut down the world, and I, as a business owner, offer services to people that is service driven, meaning they come to me for a service, which is how my business runs. As a psychologist, people come to me in my office to have therapeutic services. Well, when the pandemic hit, that meant that my office no longer ran the way that it usually did. And so that means now I have to figure out, how do I meet the needs of not only my business, but my clientele as well, which are my patients that I see for therapy. So that became something that was very, very impactful to my business. Now I need to make sure that I have the technology to run my business via the internet. I have to make sure that the infrastructure of my business is such that it can survive during this pandemic. Will people be able to schedule online? Will I have the manpower to answer calls, respond to emails, ensure that I am not missing business? Because while I'm in a catch-22 situation where my business runs by people coming to me, I had to learn how to adjust to that. But I also had to realize that my business is a very vital business in the midst of a pandemic. I, as a business owner, this sounds weird to say, but I benefit from the stress and the worries and the perceptions that came out of the pandemic. Because one thing that people started to do during the pandemic, especially around April or Mayish, they realized, maybe I need someone to talk to about this. Maybe I need to sort life out differently now that we're in a pandemic. And so I had to also shift and pivot the way I offer business. And I know that many of you all had to do the exact same thing. We also have feelings of loneliness and sadness, feelings of helplessness and frustration, changes in eating and sleeping patterns. I'll put a pin right there, because throughout the pandemic, many people realized that their eating became modified. Maybe you're eating more, or you're not eating enough. Or there's a need to feed people more because everybody is in the house more, whereas children would go out to school and receive lunch at school or breakfast at school. Now we have to prepare all of that within the home because our world has changed. And so all of that had a financial impact. Now we have to buy more grocery. We have to make sure that there are snacks in the house, because when children are at home, it's almost like the refrigerator becomes the store for them. They go to the refrigerator every 20, 25 minutes just to see if the food is still there. And then they choose whatever they want, because that's what we want them to do. We want them to have healthy eating habits, but there's a cost involved in that. There's a change in using of substances, and that can be from as benign as having a glass of wine a night to settle our nerves, to as severe as relying on negative substances such as marijuana and other um, intense drugs. Information and update burnout. And what that is that we were hearing it every day. CNN was covering it, our local news channels were covering it, it was in our social media feeds, everyone was talking about it. So it was just, we were inundated with information. Every time we turned around, it was something about the pandemic. And then that became more than just information, it became statistics. People were losing businesses, losing jobs, having to file for unemployment. And then, of course, the most important of all of that, people were dying from this pandemic. And so it became something that we, again, heard all the time and had so much information forced upon us. There's an exacerbation of existing mental health concerns. It's one thing to be depressed on a regular basis and have to deal with that. But then to have a pandemic and an impact to our business happen as well, it exacerbates things. And so while I may have been able to deal with my mental health issues prior to the pandemic, all of this now stresses me in a way that I now have to pay more attention to it. So my question to you, and of course, this is a rhetorical question, and something for you maybe to consider in your notes or to consider for yourself: What have you noticed? What have you noticed about yourself as a person, about yourself as a business owner, about yourself concerning how you have changed in this pandemic time? What have you noticed concerning your stress as it relates to the pandemic? Regardless to what you've noticed is your stress, regardless to things have what has changed for you, how things have changed for you, we have to learn how to cope. You heard me say that when the pandemic hit, I had to figure out, all right, people can no longer come to my office because it's not safe for me, it's not safe for them. And so now I have to figure out, how do I get that same manner of service to my clients without compromising what they're used to. So I had clients that I've been seeing that we now have to go into doing things virtually over a computer. And so that is something that I had to learn how to cope with. When your businesses were impacted, maybe you were a retail store and the governors and all of the politicians said that we could no longer go into the retail stores. And so as a business owner, you took a direct hit for that. And so you had to shut down your business. You had to decide, how will I offer business? If you didn't already have a website, you were scrambling trying to get a website to offer e-commerce as opposed to traditional retail. And so all of that is a manner of stress that led us to find ways to cope. Coping is the way in which we respond to or manage stress or uncomfortable emotions, the ways in which we respond to life's demands. So for me, it became, all right, I know that I love to do this. I know that this is what I want to do. How do I move from having an in person business to an online business? What was key, number one, was finding a space in my home. And I know for many of us, being in this pandemic mean that we were now working and living at home. And what did that look like? That presented its own set of stressors as well. Now, the very place that I used to go for a reprieve and to get away from work has now become the place where I work. And so home and work kind of meshed together. And it was this semblance of being always at work or working too much, not working enough. And so we have to really figure out in our coping how to do that. We have to figure out how to separate work from home, having a dedicated space. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. A dedicated space for work. For me, it was the time at which I had to completely revamp my home and have an actual home office kind of laid out for myself for the purpose of privacy and confidentiality. And so that I could offer the service that people were used to having, but in a remote type situation. Many of you had to probably increase your internet speed, had to cope with that because now everyone's home. Kids are home on the internet, their devices are connected to the internet. You are now home on the internet, you're doing Zoom meetings and all of those things. And so you have to learn how to cope with that. And a part of our coping was figuring it out, figuring out how to move forward in a different world, but getting the same types of results. Um, is coping always positive or adaptive? I will tell you the answer to that is no. There are two types of coping. There's adaptive coping, and then there's maladaptive coping. Adaptive coping is the coping that we do that causes us to figure out and plan appropriately. So sometimes that is exercise. Sometimes that is living by a schedule. Sometimes that is making sure that we have planned out and made sure that we have detailed notes on what we need to do so that we don't feel overwhelmed by not knowing exactly what we need to do and how we need to get those things done. Adaptive coping can be ensuring that we're getting enough rest. So we factor in naps and time for that de-stress and stepping away from things. That's all adaptive coping, getting with people for social time, even if that time is remote. Um, Again, taking a walk, spending time with a pet, any of those things can be adaptive coping. There's also maladaptive coping. Maladaptive coping on the surface is not coping at all or coping in a negative way. Something that will have a negative impact is not coping. So we start to drink too much. It goes from a glass of wine a night to a bottle of wine a night. It goes from having maybe one beer a week to now I'm drinking a 6 pack to a 12 pack to a 24 pack of beer a week. I am now no longer just smoking cigarettes. I am smoking marijuana. I am introducing other substances into my lifestyle. And so that's maladaptive coping. Using our body in a way that we wouldn't usually use it is maladaptive coping. Allowing our mind to be inundated with things that we wouldn't necessarily use for coping if things were all well is also maladaptive coping. So we're allowing things to come into our eye gates that we wouldn't usually do so. We're allowing things to come into our ear gates that we wouldn't usually do so. That's all maladaptive coping because it's distracting us from actually doing something that will impact our situation positively. The consequences of not coping effectively. So, if we are relying so much as people and business owners on not coping effectively, what happens is there's an avoidance of underlying concerns. There's prolonged distress. So, if you're not doing anything to impact the stress appropriately, you will remain in that place longer than one would expect. There's a short term gain. So maybe you feel good after you've had that 6 pack of beer, but there's also longer term pain because while you are inebriated or while you are not present dealing with the stress that you have going on, yes, short term you feel good, but you haven't done anything to alleviate the problems. And so there's pain associated with that. If you have issues within your finances from your business going into a different state during this pandemic, if you're not addressing that and you're not finding a way to cope with that effectively, short term, you've avoided it and it's something that you can't focus on in the moment, but long term, you haven't put anything in place. So what started as maybe a blip in your business structure can become a very big blunder in your business structure. So we really want to be sure that we're paying attention to if and when we're coping and if we're not instituting a plan to do so. You could also ensure if you're not coping well or effectively that the initial symptoms are only going to worsen. If you weren't able to get your business done effectively at the beginning of the pandemic, if you do nothing to put anything in place to ensure that you're able to run your business, you're able to function in a way that feels authentic, it's probably guaranteed that by now you haven't figured that out if you haven't done anything. And so, coming up on a year in the pandemic, what started out as something that could have been manageable with some things put in place to address the issue has now become a very big issue and something that has become overwhelming and that you need to give more credence to simply because you ignored it when you may have had an opportunity to deal with it. And so basically, what I'm saying concerning all of this is that there are levels to all of this. There's a biological level, a psychological level, a social level, and all of that comes together to be our biopsychosocial framework. The biopsychosocial model considers biological, psychological, and social factors and their complex interactions in understanding health and our experiences as humans. All of these elements influence our well being. What does all of that mean? There are various things in each of these spheres. In the biological sphere, you have your physical health, your genetic vulnerability, your drug effects, lifestyle and diet, your response to reward, your emotions, your immune and your stress response, any comorbidities that you may have. All of that comes together in our biological sphere. In the social and environmental sphere, you have things like your peer group, your work, your schooling, and this would be your business as well, your socioeconomic status, culture, family circumstances. All of those things are in our social and environmental sphere. Then there's the psychological sphere where you have perceptions, temperament, social skills, coping skills, your self esteem, your attitudes and behaviors. And those things are the way in which we as people approach situations. So, someone who's having a hard time in the psychological realm may have been very significantly impacted during the beginning of this pandemic because there was a huge shift in life, in the way in which we had to do life. And so if someone's struggling in there, it becomes very impactful to the other areas. And as you can see from this image, there is overlap. There is overlap in all of these areas of functioning. And in the center of that is our mental health. I was on a webinar a couple of days ago, and it was really about what is mental health and managing that mental health. And what I say is that we all, no matter what our issue is, no matter how good our business is going or how bad our business is going, we all have to be concerned with our mental health. Our mental health is the thing that keeps us grounded, the way in which we're attending to all of the other areas in our life. If you are dealing with a physical issue and it doesn't really resonate well for you, or you're not having a good response to it, that then taps into your mental health. If you are having a financial issue and you're not able to meet your bills, or you're not able to feed your family, you're not able to put gas in your car, while that's a social issue and that's a social concern, it has a mental health impact. And if your coping is off and you're not able to do that, again, all of this will have a impact on our mental health. And so, as you can see, there is not one area of our life that is independent of ensuring that we have good or healthy, stable mental health. And so, if you can just keep that visual in your mind, because when we are struggling with, let's say, our business practices or the way in which our business's financial health is going, to say that that isn't impacting us in our psychological realm, or to say that, oh no, my physical health isn't impacted by this at all, there is absolutely no way to separate it. If you're having financial problems, you're going to have a mental struggle with that. And on some level, that may impact the way in which your body feels. And so that's just a very basic example of the biopsychosocial model. Individual nature of coping. There is no one size fits all type of approach to coping. I can't say if your business is struggling with financial concerns or stability of employees, this is what you do to cope with that. If you are dealing with this pandemic in a way that your mind has been significantly impacted, do this and you'll feel better. I wish that there was something that I could say, if this, do that, as it relates to life and stress and coping, but I can't. Because again, like I said early on, what works for me may not work for you. And what works for you may not work for other people. And so we have to take an individualized approach to coping. We can't hand out a comprehensive coping manual and tell everyone, have at it. Take this manual. When you're dealing with financial stresses, go to chapter 5. Chapter 5 will help you with financial stressors. No such thing. No way of doing it. There is no way to say, when these stressors in life come up, this is what you do. We've all encountered that because we've all been thrown into a pandemic that has impacted us on multiple levels. The way in which we live, the way in which we do business, the way in which we have relationships, all of that has been impacted. And I don't know that we all knew what the impact would be as we started in this pandemic. In Ohio, which is where I live, our governor shut us down. I want to say it was March 16th. March 16th, he said, we're all quarantined. And on a dime, we all had to shift and figure out life differently. And so I don't know that there was anyone that thought, okay, by March 16th, 2021, we'll still be here. And so let's just make the best of this. None of us thought that way. None of us thought that the pandemic would be taking us through as long as it has. And so the way in which I have approached that may not be the way you've approached it. The impact that it's had to my business may not be the same impact that it's had to yours or other business owners that you may know. And so it's important to kind of individualize and look at things very, very individualistic. A few tips that you could do to kind of deal with coping and addressing some positive coping skills. These are just tips that I can give you, but you have to do what works for you. You have to be authentic to yourself, and you have to do things that will stick for you and will make sense for you in the long run. Take care of your physical health, maintain social connections, take a break. Sometimes it's important just to, even if it's we used to say a staycation. Well, a staycation is what we've all been on since the pandemic started. But sometimes you just have to take a PTO day. You have to take a day where you're doing nothing, just to replenish yourself. Keep a routine, spend time outside, reach out for help. As business owners, sometimes we feel as if this is my business, it's going to be on me to ensure that this business succeeds. And so if it's going to succeed, I have to do it. Sometimes we have to reach out for help. I was invited to this to do this Thursday talk by one of my friends, Nicole. And Nicole has been an excellent resource for me concerning being a small business owner during this pandemic. So sometimes we have to know where our help lies and make sure that we are reaching out to those individuals, those entities, to ensure that we are making the best decisions and coping with things appropriately. So consider that you can't do it all. There is no stress that is worse than self induced stress. And so, if there are options and uh, uh, things available to you to de stress you or to help with minimizing your stress, take advantage of those. The grants that were offered during the pandemic, the PPL loans that were offered during the pandemic to help business owners. All of those things are things to help to ensure that you don't have to do everything and that you can't do everything on your own. Take that as something to consider. In the midst of all of this, as we are learning to cope, as we are considering the changes and the impacts to our business, we have to really be concerned with self care. Self care is defined as providing adequate attention to one's own physical and psychological wellness. That means taking care of yourself. It really is very much so. The word defines itself. Take care of yourself. It will increase your effectiveness as a worker or a business owner. It will increase your your job satisfaction, and there are changes in the work culture when we're taking care of ourselves. And taking care of ourselves as business owners helps us take care of our employees or our contractors or whatever you may have in your business. Dimensions of self care are also multifaceted. So there's psychological self care, emotional self care, physical self care, social self care, and spiritual self care. And so I'll go through what some of these are as we continue. But I know that when it comes down to self care and thinking about the pandemic, everyone's like, well, I can't really do anything for self care because my self care is getting with people. My self care is being around people, and I can't be around people as a business owner. I can't network. I can't do the things that I would usually do, seeing as though we've been instructed to socially distance. Socially distancing is a thing that we have to do, but it is not social isolation. While physical and social distance can inevitably lead to less physical contact with friends, family, and cherished relationships, it doesn't mean that you are socially to isolate yourself. We have to learn how to connect differently. And so I had a milestone birthday in January, and anyone that knows me knows that I love my birthday. And so on the date of my birth, I couldn't celebrate this milestone birthday with a big party and balloons and things of that nature, but it was a very special day in that I was able to connect with family and friends via Zoom. And I know we're all kind of tired of Zoom, we're burnt out of having to connect this way, but it really is effective to keeping those connections. So, ways to connect would include apps and programs such as FaceTime or Zoom to interact with friends and families, eat meals together, either with people that you're staying at home with or through online means. Yeah, that sounds weird, right? Let's connect at 7:30. You have a meal where you are, I have a meal where I am, and we'll call that getting together for a meal. It's different and we have to shift our mindset, but it does take away that isolation piece. It takes away feeling as if you're alone all the time. take walks together. The outside is not banned. We are at a point now where we can go out and we can socially distance. And many of us, because I service two different populations, I have worked through the pandemic as well. The little kids that I see, it's kind of difficult to meet with a little kid on a computer. So there were exceptions for that. And I was considered essential to work with little kids. And so I was out all the time. But that means that we had to make those interactions quality. And so you have to make sure that the way you interact with others is different, but at the same time effective. So we have to socially distance. We have to observe the 6 foot rule and use our mask and, sanitize and keep ourselves clean and make sure that others are doing the exact same thing in our presence. We have to tell others how grateful and thankful we are for them. Find creative ways to do so, ways in which you and others can feel loved and appreciated. It's really hard to validate yourself as a business owner other than my business is thriving. In this time when business practices may fluctuate, you need to validate yourself in other ways. And so finding ways to do that are important. Psychological and emotional self care lends itself to emotional regulation. Give attention to things that you are in control of. There's no reason why you need to stress over something that you have no direct impact on. It's like stressing over what the weather is going to be. We can't stress over that. We have to adjust and adapt to it and find coping mechanisms for it, but we don't have control over it. So, bogging ourselves down with is it going to rain tomorrow makes no sense when we could just prepare for it and put an umbrella in our car or prepare for it and have a jacket with us because we can't impact it in a way that says, I know that it won't rain tomorrow because I'm in control of it. Effective behavioral choices. Set clear boundaries for your time and your energy. In times of the change and pandemic, our tolerance and our temperament may not be the same. And so we have to make sure that we're setting boundaries and that we're preserving our time and our energy. Recognizing your strengths, positive self talk, and affirmations. Affirmations is something that I deal with my patients all the time on. The world is not going to always affirm us. The world is not always going to tell us, great job, Dwonna. You've done great, Dwonna. That's wonderful, Dwonna. So sometimes you got to tell yourself. If no one else is telling you that you're doing a good job, that you're managing this pandemic as best you can, that you're managing your business as best you can, tell yourself. Look at your gains from one week to the next, or the changes that you've made from one month to the next, and affirm yourself for those things. Someone else didn't do it. And because you did, you have the right to affirm yourself for that. Manage your stress, learn the art of deep breathing, learn the art of stepping away so that you can do a woosah. We laugh at those types of things when they do it in the movies, but it's actually a very good technique to kind of recenter your body. Taking in that deep breath and then breathing it through allows your body to calm down and have a moment of stability. You want to be mindful, which there's different techniques for mindfulness, progressive muscle relaxation, guided imagery, and journaling. All of that is just to keep us present, keep us grounded, and doing those things that are important to ensuring that we're paying attention to the world around us. Awareness that can create stress, of what creates stress, we have to be aware of those things that cause stress in us. If you know that Friday morning call with the contractors, or that Thursday afternoon meeting with your contract workers, whatever those things are that create stress for you, you've got to be aware of it and you've got to be able to problem solve for it. So instead of staying up late the night before, maybe you want to get a good night's sleep, because if you've gotten a good night's sleep and you've helped yourself to minimize things that would make you irritable the next morning, maybe, just maybe, again, because it's not an exact science, but maybe having those things in place will help you not feel as stressed moving forward. You want to incorporate physical activity. What can you do to help you move? And movement is anything. I am not talking about a 30-minute rigorous routine of being in front of the television or doing a Zoom exercise class. I'm talking about moving in general, getting up from one place, going to the next, moving, making your body realize that, oh, If I sit here for too long, she's going to move. If there has been a 30-minute call at work and you've been sitting on the Zoom for 30 minutes, the very next thing that you should be planning, if it's nothing more than getting up and walking to the bathroom, you should be moving. Be realistic and be consistent. If a 30-minute walk in the middle of your day makes you feel good, do a 30-minute walk. If an hour of Pilates makes you come back to your happy place, figure it out. You've got to figure out what works for you. You've also got to get adequate sleep, healthy nutrition. You got to do things that will prevent illness. So you've got to wear your mask. You've got to cover your nose and mouth. You've got to use hand sanitizer. You've got to wash your hands for 20 seconds at minimum. You've got to do all of those things. Another key thing that really no one is going to tell you and highlight, intimacy is very important. And I'm not talking just sexual intimacy. I'm talking about the intimacy that we have with people, being intimate in close spaces, not in a sense of breaking the social distancing rule, but having that ability to touch and feel those family members that are within our bubble. And so just realizing the importance of that and just maintaining general bodily health. And all of that comes with recognizing how our physical activity or lack thereof is impacting us. With spiritual self care, you got to make time to reflect, pray, spend time with nature if that's your thing, and meditate. And when we think of meditation, people think of the symbol or the imagery of Buddha and just sitting in a calm place in that way, kind of zoned out and in Zen. That's true. That works. But meditation doesn't have to look that way. Meditation can simply be plugging away for about 5 to 10 minutes, focusing only on what you believe in, your spiritual health. It can be praying. It can be listening to a song that makes you feel good. It can be any of those things. So meditation is really just focusing on one or a major thing for a certain amount of time with no interruptions. And we can't always say that we have uninterrupted time. And so being able to focus our time and do those things are great. Reflection, looking back, here we are in February um, 2020. Oh, I'm sorry, I must put a plug there because my mother is on the line. I must say, happy birthday, Mom. Today is my mother's birthday. And so we have to reflect on that. Like last year, her birthday, we weren't in the pandemic. This year, we are. Most of us at this point, unless your birthday was well, actually now we all have. Everyone has had a pandemic birthday. From March of last year to February of this year, if you've had a birthday, which we all have, you've experienced a pandemic birthday. But there's an art in reflecting on where you've come in that year, what you've been able to maintain or attain or sustain during this pandemic. Maybe your business isn't the same. Maybe your home life isn't the same. Maybe your work life isn't the same, but it's still your life. And we have to find the value in those things and reflect on those things. Some people, spending time with nature is a very spiritual experience for them, to believe that all of the creations that we see in nature came from the creation that God put in place. And so some people have a very, very spiritual connection to nature. Another way to take care of our spiritual health is just by praying, and ensuring that we are talking to God, that we are talking to whomever our higher power is, to ensure that we're staying connected in that way. We also have to build in time for leisure, you guys. We have to make sure that during this uncertain time that we are making sure that we're doing things that recharge us and energize us. Whatever your joy is, whatever brings you joy, find activities that promote rest and relaxation and encourage creativity. So maybe your thing isn't reading, but maybe knitting is your thing. Maybe reading and knitting aren't your things, and it's crafts that's your thing. Maybe it's just spending time with a pet or doing something that just brings you joy. Whatever it is, find time to do it and or rediscover hobbies or things that you enjoy, things that you got away from because you got so bogged down with the rigmarole of life. get back to those things and have moments to reflect. You'd be surprised how much doing something that brings you joy will recharge your mind to be creative for your business. Gives you time away from business to do something that is de-stressing and doesn't allow you to focus on your business. Once you've done that, you come back to your business with new energy, with new vigor, and you're able to do so much more. In the midst of all of this coping and um, learning to take care of ourselves, we've got to set boundaries. Boundaries are very important. We have to set boundaries for our time, and we have to set boundaries for our space. You're not obligated to give your time limitlessly to those around you. You have to take time for yourself. Read your inner cues. You have to know that it's okay to set a boundary with others in order to protect your emotional well being. You can't be everything for everybody. You have to surround yourself with positivity and, again, those affirmations. When people are entering into your space and that is something that you don't want, their energy is bad, you've got to learn how to excuse them or excuse yourself. You've got to set boundaries for your space. When we work from home, it can be difficult to differentiate between the two. Where's work? Where's home? I told you that I found a specific place in my house to be my office. Maybe you don't have a room that you can dedicate as an office, but you do have a space. You do have something that is set off, set apart from your home where you and your family live to just be the place that you work. And so that when you're not in that space, you know that you're back in home, and it allows you to kind of shift your mind and be in different places while in the same place. Once you're done with work, do something to clearly mark the end of the day. Close the door of your office, turn the laptop down, let the laptop down, turn the light off in the space where you were working, go change your clothes. You're no longer in the shirt and pants that you're in. Some people are just putting on shirts nowadays, but no longer in that. You go and put on a workout shirt or something else that indicates to you that I am no longer at work. You go for a walk, whatever it takes to kind of set the boundary for your space. We've all often heard people tell me, like when I am telling people about self care, even when I'm trying to remember self care for myself, it's like it takes too much time. I will submit to you that you don't have the luxury of not spending the time that it takes to take care of yourself. You owe it to yourself, you owe it to your business. Prioritize self care and make it a part of your daily routine. Square breathing takes about 1 minute to do. You can do that in between other tasks and activities. That's just taking in breaths, letting them out slowly. All of that takes no time. Progressive muscle relaxation, and you can Google that. It'll walk you through how to tense up your body and relax your body. Tense it up, relax it. It can take 2 minutes, very easy, get it done. You're done with it in between tasks. Sometimes in sessions when I am hearing a lot of hard things and people struggle, sometimes I am engaging in progressive muscle relaxation right then and there so that I am not taking in some of the stuff that is in my environment. So it does mean that we have to set time apart, but it doesn't have to be too much time, and we don't have to look at it as a infiltration into our day. There are plenty of apps that can help us with self-care. There's the Calm app that is dedicated to meditation. It's free through the Apple and the Android store. Headspace, it's a mindfulness app, again, free through the Apple and Android store. Strides is a habit tracker. It will help you with establishing and maintaining different habits. It's also free. I know that it's in the Apple store. Wasn't very sure if it was in the Android store because I wasn't able to figure that out, but it is in the Apple store, and I'm sure the Android market has something similar to Strides. MyFitnessPal, if we want to focus on our health and being more conscious of what we're taking into our body, or even our water intake, this app will help you with that. The Grateful app is a gratitude journal. And we need to kind of start to focus on those things because we need to know what has changed in our life, what's good in our life, and be able to kind of jot those things down when we have a moment or two. So these are just some examples of apps. I'm sure you can just search your app store and figure out those things for yourself. There's a self-care assessment online, and I can make this available to our host later on. In the interest of time, I will not go into the self-care assessment, but you can do this assessment just to figure out where you are with self-care. how well you're doing with it, and what you may need to improve in order to introduce more self-care into your life. My name again is Dr. Dwonna Lenoir. I thank you so much for your attention to this presentation. And if anyone has questions or things like that, I am going to stop sharing my screen to entertain questions if there are any. Jaquetta, are you able to unmute the participants?
Yes, at this time, I am going to unmute everyone. Give me 1 second. Wrong button. There we go. Okay, so all participants are unmuted. You can unmute yourself if you have a question. Mr. Thomas, do you have a question?
No, I was just sitting back enjoying it, and I can always call my daughter and get my own.
Oh.
Very,
Thank
very
you for
lucky.
joining us.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes, Nicole.
Well, first of all, I just want to thank you, Dwonna, for giving your insight into what many are finding to be a terribly stressful time.
Mm-hmm.
But the question that I have is the number one issue that people are bringing to me is, how do I balance it? How do I balance it all? What advice would you give to your clients or people on this call who are trying to juggle school and work and worried about family members? Is that where the meditation and self-care really comes into play, in your opinion?
Yeah, and again, we have to learn the art of prioritizing. While there's always going to be multiple things that will come toward us in life, we have to realize which things are, again, within our control that we can do something about, and which things are not. And so sometimes we spend a lot of time worrying about things that are not within our control, or that we cannot address in a way that reduces that stress at all. So we have to prioritize our life and make sure that we're doing things in a way where we're giving attention to things that are our own issue, number one, that we can impact, number two, and that if we spend the time and energy on trying to do that, that it actually has some type of positive result. And so again, there's always going to be a million things to do. We only get 24 hours in each day. We have to prioritize what's important and what needs to get done, and keeping in mind that we have to keep ourselves as a priority.
Thank you for that. And you mentioned something earlier, like, people worry about things they can't control.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about, there's one thing of being informed and watching the news, but, in recent times that has caused so much stress.
Mm-hmm.
So is there any benefit, I guess, from basically unplugging?
Oh, absolutely. We have to know when we've had too much, when we've had enough of the news, enough of the negative news, enough of the things that are causing us to stress, and definitely unplug. Set a time for when you can and will allow Facebook to be your guide, when you will allow Instagram and all of these different social media outlets to be the thing that informs you, when you'll even watch CNN, because sometimes watching the news can be very stressful. If there is a lot going on, and I mean, honestly, as we've gone through this pandemic, we have also gone through social unrest. We've gone through racial tensions over the last year. We've had multiple issues with, again, police shootings and things of that nature, calamity at our Capitol. We've gone through a lot of things concerning stress and things that are inundated into our mind and our spirit by the media. So sometimes maybe it's okay to skip the nightly news. It's okay not to scroll on Facebook, or it's okay to go for a specific reason or a specific amount of time and then shut it off.
Okay, so Dr. Dwonna, I have one question dealing that we're talking about coping skills.
Mhm.
The fact that you are able to work from home as well as work in the office, how do you balance that time out if you no longer go into the office?
Yeah, there are certain days that I try not to go into the office at all and just kind of setting that as a rule for myself. And there's not always an exact science to that either, because now with the kids going back to a blended model, the day that I've designated for myself to be at home, I still have to leave the house because I have to take kids to school. And so just really being able to structure yourself and develop something for yourself that allows you to step away or decide when you're not going to go to the office and when you're going to stay at home. Because there is value in making those kinds of choices. There's value in deciding, okay, can I get this done at home? No, I probably need the serenity of being in an office that is not fully at capacity because of the pandemic to be able to focus, get it done, not be distracted, and things like that. And so you definitely have to make those hard decisions, and that is called coping.
Thank you for that.
Mhm.
Do we have any more questions from anyone that is partaking in this webinar today? I am going to share my screen, um, and it's going to have our contact information on there.
Mhm.
That's not it.
Just keep going through you could have just kept pushing your space bar, Jaquetta. It would have
Yeah, it
taken
was.
it to the end.
I thought I had it on there.
Mhm.
I did.
There
Yeah,
it is.
you can see that.
I can.
Okay, my screen looks different.
Hmm.
So, does it have our contact information on there?
It does. It has the contact information for Nicole. Nicole is with the Small Business Association, and Jaquetta is with Cincinnati Metropolitan Housing Authority, and I
Yes.
am from Live Well Group, and all of our contact information is there. With all of us have our mobile numbers there as well.
Yes, yes. And it's so weird because my screen is showing something different
That's okay.
than what you all are seeing.
That's
That's why I'm like,
okay.
wait a minute, is my screen sharing?
Mhm.
So if you have any questions as it pertains to a small business and maybe some resources you need, or if you have any questions for Dr. Dwonna, you can always reach out. Our information is here. We want to thank you for joining us today. I hope that this information was helpful and that you will be able to use it as you move forward in your daily lives in dealing with work and home in this pandemic.
Wonderful.
Nicole, you have anything you want to say?
I'm gonna take that as a no.
Right. Okay.
She said I'm
Well,
on mute. She can't come off mute.